All right, you guys, we made it to Friday. I am so sorry that we are running late. Today has been an insane day, and it seems to only be getting crazier. So first, we're going to jump right back into our series because we left you on a bit of a cliffhanger. We showed you this side by side of current President Emmanuel Macron and a person who is supposed to be Brigitte's nephew, his wife's nephew, but these two people who are not supposed to be in any way related look way too much alike. Is this just a coincidence? Well, you will soon come to realize that there are a lot of strange coincidences that just keep arising when it comes to the Macrons and their mysterious backgrounds. So, welcome back to our Becoming Brigitte series. Okay, so to briefly recap, last episode we learned that Emmanuel Macron's classmates described him as a bit of a mystery. No one knew what he was up to outside of school. He kept to himself. He wasn't a part of any cliques. Nobody knew anything about his parents or what they did for a living. Okay. We also learned that Emmanuel Macron, as the president, appeared to know very little about his own immediate family. We sort of recounted a couple of stories for you, not also including a couple of lines about his family, only a couple of lines about his family in his autobiography, while having much more to say about Brigitte's family. His family appears equally as distant from him as he is from them, refusing to discuss him ever. And his biological brother told a work colleague that Emmanuel was his first cousin. And that was before he became president. So they were already, when someone said, "Oh, do you know this guy who's like one of the ministers?" And he's like, "No, that's my cousin." Then there is, of course, the odd circumstance of him having been asked about his biological sister who lived nearby, a politician. And when the politician asked about her, oddly, Emmanuel didn't answer, but he looked at Brigitte to know what to say. That's weird, okay? Now, the only family member that seems to get any airtime from Emmanuel Macron, the person that he seems comfortable discussing publicly and showing affection for, is his grandmother, okay? His grandmother was a woman named Germaine Nogue, born Germaine Aribet, who he affectionately referred to as Manette. Okay, there they are together. When discussing his childhood in his book Revolution, she is the only one that he incorporates into his childhood often. He wrote this, quote, "So I spent my childhood in books, somewhat out of the world. It was a still life. I remember those early mornings when I would go to her room and she would tell me stories of her wartime friendships. As a child, I would pick up the thread of the interrupted discussion every day and travel through her life as if picking up a novel. And the smell of coffee she sometimes brewed in the middle of the night, and my bedroom door ajar as early as 7 in the morning when I had not yet come to her, exclaiming with feigned concern, 'Are you still asleep?' You know, there was this one journalist who even speculated, she raised the possibility that he had sort of been adopted by his grandmother, Manette. Either way, it becomes very important that we learn a little bit about this woman. Who was she? Okay, because he alleges that she taught him how to read. According to him, she lived just a few blocks away from his parents in Amiens. And he also recounts in his book that he spent his summer and his winter vacations at her family home in Bagné de Bigorre. And that's where he learned to walk. That's where he learned to fish. That's where he learned to play rugby with his grandparents. So much time spent with his grandparents. And maybe, perhaps that explains this bizarre absence of childhood photos with his siblings or with his parents. Okay, so that's a lot that he's giving us. And according to witnesses, Manette was exceedingly private, just like her grandson, often leaving the shutters to her home firmly shut, they said. And once she retired, she hardly ever ventured outside because she was surrounded by books, kind of in her own lair, which explains why and how Macron claims to have been brought up in a bunch of books as well. But which books specifically? He gave an answer to that. Now, according to journalists Candace Owens and Caroline Darien's biography entitled The Macrons, Les Macrons, or The Macron, rather, they wrote, quote, he said, quote, as a teenager, they wrote, as a teenager, young Macron escaped by reading books by André Gide and Michel Tournier, that book being called The Earl King in English. Those are the books that are on his bedside table. his beloved maternal grandmother, shared a liking for these authors with him. Now, we've already discussed Andre Gide. I think that was in our first introductory episode. This was the guy who was a self-admitted pederast who admitted to raping Muslim boys in Algeria in particular, to explore and learn about his sexuality, throwing off the chains, of course, the confines, if you will, of his upbringing, his Christian upbringing, and really learning about himself through traveling to Algeria. And yet, despite this, Macron was comfortable putting his book, just as it was on his bedside growing up with grandma, he was comfortable putting this in his presidential portrait. The other author we haven't discussed that he mentioned to these journalists, that author is Michel Tournier, apparently another favorite. And the book is an even stranger choice, I would say, for a grandmother to be sharing with her grandson. It's quite controversial, this book, okay? Again, it's called The Earl King. The Earl King being a mythological creature that chases after children. And in this book, passages are, well, I'll give you a passage. I'll just read it to you. Quote, "Children's buttocks are alive, quivering, always alert, sometimes sunken, and seconds later smiling and naively optimistic, as expressive as faces." Now, I don't know if my grandparents were doing it wrong, but they gave me the Bible. We talked about Bible passages. We weren't being given books that speak about a children's buttocks. Like, that's just completely absurd. In that book, the book's protagonist discusses children that are advanced for their age, right? And this is a quote from that book: "The category of children with surprising intellectual maturity, who seem to have read and understood everything from birth, contradicting a physical immaturity that gives an air of ingenuity to everything that they say." You know, that kind of sounds familiar, right? It's kind of virtually the exact same explanation that the press got right to working on regarding this bizarre story of Brigitte having fallen for a 14-year-old and then setting upon marrying him when she was 39, 40 years old, setting on that path towards marriage. They said, remember, Macron, this is like, despite the fact that he was a little boy, he was just so intellectually advanced. Remember, he was a virtuoso, right? He was Mozart. Don't you guys understand? He was not like regular kids, even though he was so young. We don't want you to think about that. Yeah, it seems like that second author provides that explanation, which is not an explanation. It's one that should never have been accepted. Anyways, I should tell you that Manette died April 13th, and I'm sorry, but I forgot to write down the date here. I want to say it was in 2021. We will correct that, but the point is it's also April 13th, a day that Brigitte Macron was born. It's also the same day that the CIA's MK Ultra program was born. And if you've been watching my new series, I am borderline obsessed with learning everything that I can about the MK Ultra program. And this is not a discussion that should just be taking place in America. You know, learning about the programs of our deep states, these very real programs that existed and that we don't learn about in school, is a terrifying process. It's one of the reasons why I routinely promote that book, Chaos, because it ripped me into a new reality of understanding just how evil our governments have been, and I would argue are. There is no conspiracy here. The MK Ultra was real. The government was obsessed with all of these different programs. Really, the main point of them trying to condition the brain, trying to brainwash people, sometimes through isolation, which it sounds like Emmanuel Macron spent a ton of time isolated throughout his childhood. I mean, he's acknowledging that he lived through books, and his friends are acknowledging, or should be friends, are acknowledging that he was kind of a loner and on his own. So they would experiment psychologically through isolation, through drugs, you know, LSD, drugging people to see if they could get them to commit crimes or to commit other acts unwittingly, essentially trying to establish a Manchurian candidate. Somebody that responds to cues, does what they want them to do without question, wondering if they could control, and using this, by the way, as a weapon of sorts. Like I said, it is so important for people to learn about that MK Ultra program and the different names that it took on. It like started earlier than when it was named the MK Ultra program and went on further. And ask yourself whether you really believe when they say they just discontinued it. They just were no longer interested in drugging soldiers and trying to see if they could kill people and programming people. Ask yourself if you believe that your government, who is capable of that kind of evil, is also capable of telling you the truth, that once they got caught, they just stopped it. And then also recognize that the majority of the documents pertaining to that program were destroyed. So we don't know just how global that program went. We don't know every element of that program. And if any person said that they were a part of that program, and many have, that person would be dismissed as evil or insane or lying. And one element of that program was, of course, sexual perversions, like committing a sexual assault in order to then establish how it impacts somebody's psyche. Truly evil stuff, okay? Now, earlier, I told you that Macron's alleged biological parents, who you see here up on the screen, had some interesting jobs just off the bat. His father, Jean-Michel Macron, was a psychiatrist. And yes, of course, we know for a fact that psychiatrists have done some evil things, some very evil things throughout the years. Don't even get me started before I should actually get started, go onto a tangent about who Sigmund Freud was and how disturbing it is that he is taught within our school systems here in America as some sort of a hero, that he broke through modern psychiatry. Yeah, how much of a breakthrough and a contribution did he make? Again, we'll pause and talk about that in a different episode so as not to get lost. But yes, Daddy Macron was a psychiatrist, and his mother, Frances, she's very important there on the right, was a pediatrician. What an absolute combo for Emmanuel Macron growing up, right? Well, interestingly enough, something very interesting was discovered about his mother, Francoise. Sorry, I think I said Frances, Francoise. Now, we told you she was a pediatrician who also served as a medical advisor to the Social Security office. Well, eventually something very interesting came up about her and her work for the Social Security Administration, okay? This I'm going to read straight from journalist Xavier Poussard's upcoming book, which he is going to be available on Amazon. If in case you want to skip through to the end of the story and see where it ends. He writes, quote, "Faced with the wall of Emmanuel Macron's childhood, we decided to screen it meticulously with this question in mind. Why did the family refuse to respond to journalists' requests? And why did they need Brigitte's approval? A hearing at the French National Assembly caught our attention. It was that of Sylvain Telesfort. She was giving a testimony. Sylvain Telesfort was the president of the Institute for Intersexuality and Hermaphroditism and the Association of Europe. Now, she was born in Beauvais in 1956 under the name Sylvain Telesfort, and then changed her name to Sylvain by a court ruling in Paris on May 15, 2007. So actually, Sylvain was born a he, and he incidentally revealed to the French National Assembly that he had been given administrative support in his gender transition by a senior doctor at the Primary Health Insurance Fund, Dr. Yep, you guessed it, Francoise Macron, also known as Emmanuel Macron's mother. So a person who had transitioned suddenly testifies and says, actually, yeah, the person that assisted me in doing that was Dr. Nogue. Francoise Macron actually assisted me with this transition. So we know that that took place, that she was involved in supporting gender transitions. The question then remained whether this was simply a unique case or whether Macron's mother had been involved in this category of work, assisting people who were transgendered more extensively. And the answer came out last year when an intersex individual, goes by the name Alexandra, described how she had benefited from, quote, waivers granted by the National Referral Advisor, Dr. Francoise Macron Nogue, who, it must be said, is the mother of the current president. She has done a tremendous amount of work following all kinds of generations of people like me, granting subsidies so that we can have access to the best specialists, so that we can take our time, and so that in everyday life, we are not on the margins. If people were rejected by their families, she would find them a small room, and they would receive a disability pension for the duration of the trip. In short, it was very, very well organized. I don't understand why people despise this protocol, end quote. In the second interview, she explained that Françoise Nogue was concerned with a particular pathology known as primary congenital pseudo-hermaphroditism. But you guys, I'm sure all of that is just a coincidence. All of it. I mean, anyone who does not understand how these things just keep happening in the world is just a crazy conspiracy theorist, right? Just a crazy conspiracy theorist. I mean, yeah, okay, I get it. We've got some questions about the gender of his wife, why her past doesn't seem to be coming together. We have some questions, sure, yes, about his past. His dad is a psychiatrist. His mother does some specialty work assisting people in their transitions, and they kept this quiet when they got married. And sure, when they became the president and the first lady, they just had all of these either transgendered or proud pedophilic type things keep popping up. And I'm sure all of this is a coincidence, guys. The books, everything, it's just one big coincidence. Let's pause there because there's going to be a few more coincidences that are going to happen. So I can throw it to one of our sponsors, which is Goldco, because President Trump is back in office, and that could be great for both gold and silver. Under Trump's first term, the price of gold soared 53% and the price of silver jumped 51%. What could happen over the next 4 years? And will gold continue to break records in 2025 and beyond? We're going to find out. Gold and silver have been used as a store of value for centuries. The government cannot easily manipulate them, and they are known as hedges against the market risk and inflation. That's why I've personally bought gold and silver from my great partners at Goldco. Goldco is a top-rated precious metals company. They've supported this show from the beginning, and they've helped hardworking Americans purchase over $3 billion in gold and silver. They know what they're doing. Right now, you can get a free copy of their 2025 gold and silver kit. On top of that, you could also qualify for up to $15,000 in bonus silver, possibly even more. So to learn more, go to CandaceLikesGold.com. Again, that's CandaceLikesGold.com. Also, there is Tax Network. I want to tell you about them because the IRS is the largest collection agency in the world, and they are stepping up enforcement for 2025. So if you owe back taxes or you have unfiled returns, do not wait for the IRS to come after you. Simply avoiding them, obviously, is the worst thing you could possibly do. Getting ahead of this is the smart move, but do not contact them alone either. Turn it over to the team at Tax Network USA. Why? Because not all tax resolution companies are the same. Tax Network USA has a preferred direct line to the IRS. This means that they know which agents to deal with and which to avoid. Tax Network USA has proven strategies that are designed to settle your tax problems in your favor, whether you owe $10,000 or $10 million. Their attorneys and negotiators have resolved over $1 billion in tax debt. So talk with one of their strategists because it's free. Stop the threatening letters. Stop looking over your shoulder. Put your IRS troubles behind you once and for all by calling 1-800-958-1000, or you can visit tnusa.com/Candace. Again, that's tnusa.com/Candace. All right, now let's get back into the story of Brigitte, because there just seems to be a lot of coincidences going on here. So we had mentioned already a journalist by the name of Sylvie Baumel, right? She's that left-leaning journalist who has bylines in Vanity Fair. Like I said, this stuff was not coming from conspiracy theorists. This is such a lie that is told to the English-speaking world. She is the one who has dedicated the most time into trying to get into the past of Brigitte, to learn about the past of Brigitte. And she just kept coming up against a wall. And again, to remind you, these journalists were like, yay, powerful woman taking charge at the Élysée Palace. I want to learn more about her so I can promote her to the world. You know, who doesn't love a strong character, especially if you're a feminist like these writers were? So she begins working on the second biography about Brigitte, entitled He Had Just Turned 17. Actually a funny title. It's an untrue title, and Sylvie Baumel actually disputes it in this very book. She lands upon a different answer in her last chapter. She writes that Emmanuel Macron had actually only just turned 15. She probably went with a different title because they would have panicked at the Élysée Palace if she went with he just turned 15, right? They probably would have been doing some terrifying things. Maybe they would have just called her into the office for a talk. Well, throughout this second investigation leading up to the publication of this book, she poured through all of these public interviews given by Brigitte and just kept coming across these little mistakes that Brigitte would make about how old she was during certain things. And so there is this very famous judge in America known as Judge Judy, and Judge Judy says something. She repeats that if you lie, you have to have a good memory, right? If you don't lie, you don't have to have a good memory because it's just true. So you don't have to be like, oh, what did I tell this person? What did I say? And make all these little errors. So one mistake that Brigitte made in this long biographical interview that she gave to Elle magazine was regarding her older sister, her late sister, Mary Vaughn, who had died in a car accident. And now when Brigitte gave this interview, she said that it was, sort of this traumatic thing that was ingrained in her mind, that she was 8 years old at the time of her sister's death, and that she carried her sister around with her every single day of her life. She also stated that her niece died a year later at the age of 6. So Xavier Poussard was very troubled by this. First and foremost, right away, Sylvie Bamel was able to determine that actually, no, she wasn't 6 when her sister died. She was 8. Now, that's just a 2-year difference. But I feel that by the time you're 8, if something that big happens in your life, you don't really mess up the date by 2 years. Like, it would just be a very raw memory, but maybe it was just a mistake. But regarding that second person that she says died, the niece that allegedly died a year later, so this would be back-to-back big deaths in the family, he was just going, I don't see that anywhere. And he thought that that was strange because there had been so much written about Brigitte's nieces, and yet there was no mention of one who had died anywhere. So he got right to work researching it, and finally, at long last, he was able to confirm by visiting a family plot that Brigitte's family had, that there was a niece named Sylvie who had passed away following a surgery in 1996. Okay, great. Phew. But that was nearly 6 years after her sister Mary Vaughn had died. Not 1 year, but 6. Now that's a huge difference. So what was going on? Anyways, Sylvie Bamel's main focus on this second book was really trying to learn more about Brigitte's first husband, Andre Louis Ozier, right? That's the banker that she had married when she was 21 years old, the guy who had his wife rather dramatically stolen from him by a teenager, virtuoso Mozart type guy. I mean, that's gotta hurt. And no one could get in touch with him. Remember, we spoke about Virginie Linhart, that documentary filmmaker, who similarly said this was like a black hole. She referred to him as the Elysee Palace's best kept secret. No one could get through. So there was also a magazine, Capital magazine, who summed it up in 2017 with this general impression, referring to Andre Louis, the first husband, as, quote, a real ghost. Not a single photograph of him on the web. Not a single image in the thick press agency catalogs. Biographies barely mention his career as a banker. What ever happened to Brigitte Macron's ex-husband? So having renewed her investigation again, Sylvie Bamel, she also remarked how weird it was that this man who had worked at 2 big banks, one of them being Credit du Nord, seemingly left the industry without a trace. She wrote in her book that it was, quote, like an episode of Black Mirror, where the president's offices have found a way to penetrate the brains of his former acquaintances and erase everything. Prior to the release of her book, Sylvie decided to release a few excerpts from her book, okay, in this magazine called Le Point. And then suddenly, at long last, in that magazine, in April of 2019, ahead of her book publication, a wedding photo, emerged from Brigitte's first marriage. So they're now in office, and then we are now 2 years that they've been in office about, and here we go, ta-da. Actually, I guess you could say a year and 3 months. Ta-da, boom, here is a picture from Brigitte's first marriage, allegedly. Here it is. Here's the photo. I want you to look at it. Just take a look at that photo. We're told that's Andre Louis, and that's Brigitte Trogneau. Now, I have to tell you, I am not a facial recognition software, but that woman, we can keep this up for a bit, guys, does not look to me like the current First Lady Brigitte Macron. Okay, I know faces change, but that does not look to me like the current First Lady Brigitte Macron. Okay, just take a look at this side by side. Shortly after, begins a career Maybe I could say these people are related, but just checking it, I'd say, nope. What happened to your teeth? Did you start smoking crack? This is not, who is this person in this photo? Okay. But you can't just make assumptions on the basis of looking at people and deciding what's true and what's false. And we do, by the way, they were able to find, Sylvie Bamel was able to find a marriage certificate, which certifies that in Le Ticket, somebody named Brigitte Trogneau definitely did marry someone named Andre Louis Ozier on June 22nd, 1974. So that checks out. And not only that, but the best man at the wedding was her brother, Jean-Michel Trogneau. And that was a huge breakthrough, because this tells us that Brigitte was extremely close with her brother. If you made him the best man of your brother, the best man at your wedding, you would assume that means that you were super de-duper close. But the public was only just learning about Jean-Michel. So they're going, well, this is weird. Why did you fundamentally erase him from your life? Like, is this like the worst family feud ever once you became the first lady? Yeah, that seems a bit strange. So here are some more weird facts that I'm going to share with you. In our legal letter, we specifically asked Brigitte Macron, well ahead of today's publication, to confirm to us in writing that she, the current First Lady of France, is in fact the woman that is pictured in this photo. And she refused to answer our question. Okay, here it is. We've got this letter. She refused specifically to answer the question as to whether or not that was her. You see number 8, is Brigitte Macron the same person pictured in the Ozier wedding photo? No response. And what's more interesting is that it's not the first time that she refused to answer that basic question. She also refused to provide a basic answer to that question in a court case, a defamation case against the journalist Natasha Ray. You've been hearing about this. She won in defamation case. Well, now I'm going to tell you the details here of how Natasha Ray lost a defamation case. Not to her claim that Brigitte Macron was a man or lived as a man before transitioning, if you will, to Brigitte Macron, but rather by getting details wrong, okay? By speculating. She looked at this photo of Andre Louis Ozier in the wedding, and she, in her mind, said, I don't think this guy ever existed. And actually, the man in that photo looks much more to me like a different guy named Louis Andre. Yeah, literally just flip the name. So you have Andre Louis in the photo. She thought that in that photo was actually Louis Andre, who is in fact his first cousin. So she speculated. She just made that assertion. Like, that's not, they're just pretending, and that's whoever it is that his first cousin married. But Natasha was in fact wrong, okay? So the Élysée Palace called up Louis Andre, had a conversation, and encouraged him to sue her for defamation, which he did. So again, I want to be very clear. What was at root in that defamation case? It was not whether or not Brigitte Macron was born a male. And I also want to be clear here that defamation case would not have taken place were it not for the intervention of the Élysée Palace, promising that they would join in on the lawsuit, even though they never did. Now, how do we know they did that? Because another journalist, another left-leaning journalist, feminist, named Emmanuelle Anison, who similarly wrote a book about Brigitte Macron, wanting to debunk all of the rumors about whether or not Brigitte was born a man. She was the only journalist who actually penetrated through to the Ozier family. She actually spent time with that misidentified cousin, Louis Andre. And he told her how it all went down, and she recorded it in her book. The story goes that the cousin, John Louis, had a wife named Catherine Adoy, and convinced of her theory that he was actually the man in the photo, she contacted his wife. Natasha Ray contacts his wife, Catherine, on WhatsApp, and she sends a message at 3 a.m. in the morning. She's like, on to the story. She knows something weird, and she goes with her instincts rather than the facts, and she writes to this woman, I know everything, absolutely everything, for you, for John Louis, for Jean-Michel. And I guess for her, this was like a journalistic strategy of not really knowing everything, knowing something was wrong, but hoping that if you pretended that you knew everything, that person might be forthcoming. But Catherine wasn't forthcoming. She instantly showed it to her husband and was like, what is going on? And so her husband contacted Lawrence Ozier, just reminding you that's Brigitte's alleged firstborn daughter, who also happens to be his cardiologist. And Lawrence says, you got to call Brigitte. You got to call mom, because she's thinking about filing a complaint too. This is harassment. So he does. The cousin calls up Brigitte, and here is what he tells the journalist happened next in his own words. Quote, Brigitte tells me she's sorry and that it's all her fault, that we need to press charges, and that she agrees to file a joint action. I hear Emmanuel Macron's voice in the background asking him to hurry up because they must leave. Before hanging up, she promises to send me a copy of her family record book, which she didn't. I also asked her to certify in writing, which she did, pardon. I also asked her to certify in writing that it was her in the 1974 wedding photo with Andre, which she didn't. I did not speak to her directly on the subject after that. So again, he says that she's like, yeah, no, file. I'm going to file with you. Do this. And he's like, well, could you send me just like in writing? Because, obviously this will be proof. Get these people in trouble. Just say you are certifying that that's you in the wedding photo. And Brigitte at the Élysée Palace says no, or goes cold. Afterwards, he makes good on his side of the deal. He files a complaint against Natasha Ray. He sends documents to Brigitte's lawyers. Brigitte then calls him back and says, you know what? Actually, the palace is recommending that we file our action separately. Here's what Jean-Louis says happens next. Quote, she told me that the Élysée preferred to launch two separate actions. She was walking out on me, it clearly meant. It clearly meant if you want to continue, you're on your own. Get a lawyer of your own. We had already filed a complaint. There was no turning back, so we went ahead on our own. Since then, when I tried to call Brigitte back, I don't get through to her, but to her secretary, who has become unreachable. So long story short, the First Lady played him, right? She got him all fired up and said, file, we're going to file with you, blah, blah, blah. He's like, okay, can you certify that? And nope, they were manipulated, and then they were betrayed by the presidential couple. And the journalist recounts that you can definitely tell that he's a bit stung, that the Oziers felt a bit stung by that. Very strange, again, such an easy thing to certify. But what she really wanted, Brigitte, was for him to go through the defamation, for him to win the defamation, because he actually was not the man pictured in that wedding photo. And then for her and her husband to be able to publicize the newspapers, we won a defamation trial against the crazy journalist who said that Brigitte was born a man. Oh, well, Brigitte just won a defamation case. You keep hearing that. She's won defamation cases pertaining to this. That is how they are doing it. Again, going after the details, but not the substance of what people are investigating. Now, you have to understand that by now, within France, the internet was just on fire with conspiracies. I mean, first and foremost, where the heck is the first husband? Where is Andre Louis? Well, as fate would have it, shortly after Sylvie Bemel publishes her book looking into the matter, on October 8th, 2020, suddenly Tiffany, the second daughter, announces in a weekly magazine that actually her dad already died. A year ago, actually, in 2019. People are starting to pry. And now she's like, actually, he's dead. He died a year ago. Here is the quote that was published in Paris Match announcing that. Tiffany said, my father died. I buried him on December 24th, 2019 in the strictest privacy. How convenient. How convenient, right? That, like, I don't know, the First Lady's first husband, who everybody's starting to look into, just drops dead right at the moment where people realize something's going on here. I would say it's remarkably convenient for the Macron family. Also, by the way, this is kind of weird, but Tiffany announcing her dad's death in that Paris Match magazine, which we know Paris Match is controlled to some degree by Mimi Marchand. It's one of the places where she gets particular photos and storylines published. Well, what's even stranger is that Tiffany got the details wrong about her dad's death. Yeah, isn't that really weird? One, he was not buried at all. He was cremated, and his cremation date was not on the 24th, as she said, but 4 days later on December 28th. How odd. Maybe the journalist just made a mistake. Another weird coincidence happening in this never-ending saga. Now, how do we know the actual dates? Well, let's go back to that first cousin. Remember, that first cousin, not very happy with this family, okay? Andre Lewis felt that he had been burned by the presidential couple in filing this suit. And so he opened up to the journalist Emmanuel on his own about the funeral service. So apparently the story goes that he had received a call from Andre's sisters. Again, this is his first cousin, informing him of the death and that there was going to be a quick funeral. He provided the journalist with the booklet that was actually distributed at this very quick funeral. And I will tell you, it is a very odd choice for an obituary photo. Here it is. Here we go. Andre Ozier of a ceremony taking place, which Stephane got the date wrong by accident, I'm sure, December 28th, 2019. I mean, who would announce this, by the way, a year after? It's just crazy. And then at the bottom there, I think that means our friend, our brother, our companion, our grandfather, and our papa. There it is. Now, even for a far left journalist who is not prone to conspiracy theories, even for Emmanuel Anizan, it seemed to her to be a very weird choice for a photo for a death announcement. So she asked him flat out, like, this is weird. What's going on with this choice of a photo? And the cousin told her, John Luis replied to her and said, quote, I think this was the only photo that turned up when they went looking for one for the funeral because all of the others had been destroyed. Destroyed? Emmanuel muses. I am not Natasha Ray, but I still am a bit puzzled. What? So all that's left for a man's life in pictures, apart from his wedding photo, is a photo of him in a swimsuit to illustrate his final departure? She asks in her book. Yeah, somehow every other photo from his life had been destroyed. Okay. So you're probably wondering, what the heck is going on here? What's going on? Well, Xavier Poussard was actually able to trace the real Andre Lewis through banking records. It turns out that he never worked at Credit du Nord, that bank, which is why so many other journalists were effectively chasing their tails. And so he gives that information to Emmanuel Anizan because she's much more of a mainstream journalist and she might be able to pick up some more. He also provides her with access to a Facebook group. He's like, no, this man did exist. And it's filled with John Luis's old work colleagues from the bank that he actually worked at. And he's helping her to assuage her suspicions and doubts that this man plausibly maybe never even existed. And here is how Emmanuel Anizan concludes the chapter of the story of her research into him. And this is, again, about the husband, Brigitte's first husband, Andre Louis Ozier. She wrote, quote, his sisters wouldn't talk to me, nor his children, so I called a few former colleagues via Facebook groups of former bankers. They all speak enthusiastically of Day, kind, cult, polite, who talked a lot about his children whom he adored. Day, who smoked too much, whom they felt was lonely, devastated. One of them sent me a professional collection of portraits from the mid-2000s where Andre poses serious in a suit and a tie among his colleagues at the Amiens bank branch. The 1974 groom is clearly recognizable, even if he has started to lose his hair. These colleagues kept in touch with each other after retirement, but not him, who cut all ties with them too. Andre Ozier has disappeared from the radar's scope. For my part, I tried to contact members of the Ozier family, but no one wanted to reply. Susan Spray, John Louis Ozier's first wife, even hurriedly hung up the phone on me when I told her I was interested in Brigitte Macron. Ah, yes, no, thank you. No, thank you, sir. Ooh la la, no, goodbye. Click. Elsewhere, John Louis, who attended the funeral, tells her that it took place, quote, just 4 days after the death. No information had leaked to the newspapers. The Élysée Palace wanted it to happen quickly, and it seems that Emmanuel Macron was personally involved in making sure that it did. The express funeral, organized on the sly and in a hurry early in the morning at 8:30 a.m., before opening time to avoid journalists. The booklet with the photo was placed on the chairs. A dozen people were present, seated in separate clans. On one side, Andre's sisters. On the other, Brigitte's 3 children, Stéphane, Lawrence, and Sebastian. Brigitte Macron did not attend. Andre's companion, I guess this means like a partner, maybe someone he was in a relationship with but never married, unknown to all, was also there at some distance. Early side, after 20 minutes, the ceremony was over and everyone walked out immediately. Afterwards, I went with the Ozier children and Andre's sisters for a coffee and a croissant. Members of security staff stood on guard outside. We ended up letting them in because it was so cold. The atmosphere was heavy and everyone left quickly afterwards. Okay. Quite the funeral, very quick. Why is the Élysée Palace involved? Also, guys, isn't it kind of weird that Brigitte would not, out of some basic respect, go attend the funeral of a man that she was married to for 32 years? So the Élysée Palace got involved to keep it hush-hush, but they didn't attend the funeral? Does that even sound right? The father to your children? Also, and this is incredible, according to the first cousin, John Lewis, at the funeral, he spoke to Andre's partner, who told him that he had found tickets to Africa in Andre's jacket pocket, plus a large amount of money in it. He said, quote, he had emptied his accounts, organized his departure on the sly. He dreamed so much of going to Africa again. Okay. All right, guys, what are we to make of that? All right. It is very weird for someone's lover, companion, partner, whatever you want to call it, to say that. What really happened to Andre Lewis, who was cremated very quickly, even though his daughter says he was buried? What accidentally says he was buried? Sometimes you mix that up. What really happened to Andre Lewis? What drove him to become a recluse all of a sudden, not associating with his former bank friends from the 70s? How did all of those photos of him suddenly get destroyed? He's only left with one of him. He's got two photos. Here's me in the wedding, and here's me on a beach in my trunks. And these are the only photos available of my life. Doesn't that seem like a systematic destruction? I can't think of any circumstance where that would be the case, that photos would just all be gone, as if you would keep every photo of yourself in your childhood in one house. Did he actually die? Did he escape with the assistance of the Élysée Palace? Did he try to escape, but the Élysée Palace intervened? Imaginations can certainly run wild right now, right? But we can't confirm anything, obviously. What I can tell you is that, oddly enough, another journalist named Sophie Descartes reported in a 2022 issue of Paris Match, which was published, that Andre Lewis ended his days in a psychiatric clinic with a guard at his door supervised by Alexander Bonella. He's a very controversial figure. The Élysées' notorious and controversial security chief of staff who ended up in a huge scandal known as the Bonella scandal, okay? Why would that journalist say that? I can tell you that that information was instantly denied the same day on Twitter by Tefon. But despite the family being extremely litigious in nature, always going after people for defamation, the Macrons never did sue that journalist who said that for defamation. I think that's a perfect place for us to pause, because that's a lot of information and a lot of pieces that you have to put together. I'm going to tell you very quickly about American financing, because I know that there are a lot of Americans that are carrying around high credit card balances that charge 20% or more every month. It's time to take control of your debt. If you're a homeowner and you've been waiting to figure out how to get your finances in order, you need to call my friends at American Financing today. American Financing salary-based mortgage consultants are helping homeowners just like you tap into their home's equity to get out of high-interest debt. They are saving their average customer $800 a month by doing this. Saving that kind of money every month should make the decision really easy. All it takes is a 10-minute, no-cost, no-obligation phone call to find out how much you could be saving. And if you start today, you may be able to delay 2 mortgage payments. So call American Financing today at 800-795-1210. Again, that's 800-795-1210. Or you can visit americanfinancing.net/Owens. It's americanfinancing.net/Owens. Okay, for those of you that thought that I fell into a hole, I didn't. We have been so crazed because we were working on our book launch. And I am so pleased, especially just if I could even tell you the journey of working on the second book. I began writing this book in, I think, 2018. But right after my first book, which was published, in 2020, right after my first book, which was published. And the title of my new book, which I have worked on for so long, is Make Him a Sandwich. And here it is, you guys. I am so excited. It is available for purchase, for pre-purchase really, at makehimasandwich.com, or you can go to CandaceOwens.com and hit the link that's in the banner. I just want to let you guys know that if you are a premium Club Candace and Book Club subscriber, you're going to be getting a special discount, a 20% discount code for purchase. And you'll also get an email with a 25% discount code within 36 hours to Nimi Skincare, which is one of our sponsors here and the products that I use if you purchase a copy of the book and use the 20% discount code. Any regular pre-order of the book will also receive a discount of 15%. So if you buy this as it's on pre-sale, it will be cheaper than when we actually release it. And you will similarly get a discount code of 15% off Nimi Skincare within 36 hours. So if you want a signed copy of my first book, I'm going to see how many I can do, maybe break a record. You can pick that up at shopcandace.com. That would be a signed copy of our first book. So we're just going back into bookland. And the first book club episode, by the way, for those of you, we are reading Chaos. That book is going to be at 6 p.m. Eastern this coming Tuesday. So many things happening. This book, Make Him a Sandwich, labor of love. It was like having honestly, it was like a book child, so to speak. And it was because I knew early on that the modern feminist movement had nothing to do with feminism, had nothing to do with helping women or listening to women, but rather developing a really cheap tactic to go after men. And so obviously this book, we get into the Me Too movement. I had already written years ago this chapter on Taylor Swift's brand of feminism. And I really do think it's just like a God thing that right now it seems like people have the appetite to maybe listen and to think about what modern feminism is with this whole Justin Baldoni, Blake Lively, her dragon, Taylor Swift's involvement going on. It's just like perfect because my book was owned by two publishers, wrangled it out of the hands of the first one. The second one got it out of the second one, and now it's just mine. And so I'm grateful for God's timing on this. And honestly, I feel like if it had come out any earlier, perhaps people on the left who are now watching this podcast would not have been as receptive to it. But there was something about this Justin Baldoni case where I feel like we are ready to discuss toxic feminism. And so the cover is me. If you're wondering why I'm holding that and you're not familiar, that is the iconic Gloria Steinem sign she held at a We Shall Overcome for women. So I wanted to be that. I think I did a very good job. We should have done a side by side. I think I look more like Gloria Steinem than Brigitte Macron looks like the wedding photo. That's what I think. You guys agree with that, right? Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. So yeah, it is available for pre-sale. You can also go to makehimasandwich.com. We grabbed that domain name, clubcandace.com. And I am just beyond excited to share this book with you. We just have so much going on this year, and I'm just so grateful for all of you who have supported us through everything. And that is the reason that I deleted my Instagram, because I'm going to put up a big banner about my book, but then we were very much in Macron land, wanting to make sure we fact-checked everything that we were sharing on the show today. By the way, in terms of this information that I'm giving you, it is all going to be cited and sourced in Xavier Poussard's forthcoming book, which we will be able to purchase, I think, sometime next week. He is a methodical creature is what I could tell you. Like his method is incredible, and he was obsessive about this case. He's dedicated years of his life and has given up so much. Truly a journalist that has gone out of style and out of fashion, like a journalist committed to the truth by any means necessary and willing to give up a lot for it. He really has given up so much of it. So it's a very exciting time. And I'm going to look at some of your questions, and I hope that everything that I gave you is clear. It's why we had to make this a series, because you can only kind of digest so much at a time. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just crazy. You're like, oh, the mom is also involved in transgender stuff and this and that. And it's the gaslighting of the public for me. The way that they gaslight us and pretend there's nothing there. Oh, he's just above board. Emmanuel Macron and Brigitte are above board. Like, are you insane? Are you insane? What is the media entity? It will literally having you hate people that are trying to shed light and adoring people who are covering our world in such darkness, Anyways, getting to your comments, Autumn Coffee writes, coincidence that every single world leader is soulless and spineless? We accidentally learned of Epstein. Imagine what we don't know. Do you think anyone will save the world? Would you consider running for office? Guys, I hate to tell you, but there is an Epstein connection in this story. We haven't gotten to it yet. Epstein was Mr. International, and that's why I said there are global considerations for what is happening in France right now. It is all connected, and yeah, so you're jumping ahead, Autumn Coffee. Carrie writes, I am hooked on this story. Just ordered your book too. Thank you so much. Please hire the composer for this docuseries that was fired because he was mean to Taylor Swift. I feel like dramatic music to your WTF moments would be epic. I promise you, that composer is so famous and so great. I went through his Instagram, like, there's no way I can afford him. There's just no, maybe if this book sells 3 trillion copies. Okay, so get on that, guys. Buy Make Him a Sandwich. Go to makehimasandwich.com, buy it, and maybe I will be able to afford Brian Tyler, which would be really cool. Also, I think it would be cool if Justin Baldoni dropped his version of the movie that we never got to see and called it like Justin's version. It's like a little petty nod to Taylor Swift, Taylor's version, like her owning her masters. He just owns his masters. But he would never do that because he's too nice. Give it to me, Justin. I'll drop it. I'm not so nice. Not when I'm this pregnant. Sticky Bjork writes, I started following you 6 years ago and I will follow you wherever you go. Love you, Candace. Love from the Faroe Islands. Amazing. Thank you so much. It has been amazing to see how many people from around the world we just have been able to pull into this discussion. I think it's such a good thing. Like I said, a true moment of life. Thank you, De Silva, who just writes, you're a boss. Thank you so much. And then writes in, thank you, muito obrigada. Merci. 3 different languages. Love that. Irrelevant writes, you are relevant. Don't call yourself irrelevant. God's warriors for Candace. Make our families safe again. Arcadia Dark Matter writes, from a French nationalist, a sort of make France great again. Keep the faith, Candace. Thank you guys. And I believe in nationalism. I really do. I think right now we are suffering from the curse of globalism. A lot of shadows in the dark that don't really care about us as individuals and don't really care about what happens to us as nation states, but rather are kind of trying to turn us all into the same and making us think that we're crazy. I mean, talking about psychiatry, it has been a psychiatric curse upon the world to routinely tell people that they're conspiracy theorists when they start noticing some very distinct patterns and have reasonable questions about it. Sending legal letters. Also, this whole era of legal abuse, it's so out. I am telling you, it is so out because this is all they know, right? When they lie, when they get caught doing something wrong, it's like, I'm just going to launch a lawsuit. And that is coming up. I really do believe that era is really over. It's backwards thinking. Do the right thing, tell the truth, and be bold. And I think that you will be awarded in the end. This is from Little Light. Little Light writes, Candace Owens, I hope you don't mind me sharing something vital with the sea of people here in your comment section. If you truly want to understand what the mark of the beast is and what a beast represents in the Bible, then I highly recommend From America to Babylon, Making the Mark. That's apparently a documentary. I'm not familiar with it, but I do know that I tend to stay away from people that are very into the Babylon theme. I think that really is something. And obviously one of the books on our book list is Hollywood Babylon or Babylon Hollywood, which was written by Kenneth Anger. And it really tells you about the origins of Hollywood and how dark it is and how they did want to basically create a modern Babylon. So we'll get into that. And lastly, Truth Be Told writes, many thought they took something from you in your season of trials. They lack creativity and will now grow in envy, realizing that you actually have it. We pity them and love all of this for you. Keep on journalizing us. Thank you so much. Yeah, last year was definitely a lot of trials, a lot of hardships, but I never, ever, ever for a single second doubted that I was doing the right thing because you just have to continue to tell the truth. And like I said, the old systems are failing, the smearings, the libels, trying to create someone into a monster when they're not. It's just a dawn of a new era. And it feels like we are all coming together. It really is about goodness fighting evil. And I, every single time, am going to bank on goodness because, well, Christ is King, you guys. Head to makehimasandwich.com or clubcandace.com. Pre-order the book. I'm so excited. Share it, please, on your Instagrams and your Facebooks and your TikToks and tell everybody about it. It is a great book on modern feminism. Also, by the way, guys, to the fellas here, I think with Valentine's Day coming up, you got to get her this gift. Make her a sandwich. .com. And if she responds well to it, she's a keeper. You got to marry that one. Because you're like, she's like, love Candace Owens. Great. Keeper. If she's like, what is this? I'm a modern feminist. I don't know. I'm not saying dump her. I'm not saying she's not the one. I'm just saying that if she loves the book, she might be a keeper. That's it. All right, guys, we will see you on Monday.